My name is Ben Edgerly Walsh, and I am the Climate and Energy Program Director for VPIRG. I know folks are still joining, but I'm going to go ahead and get started just in the interest of time. I wanted to start just by saying I'm a huge fan of VCAN and all of the work that all of you do. When I saw that this was the 15th annual VCAN conference, I realized actually the first one I went to was the second annual VCAN conference. I almost have a perfect record, but was not in Vermont, I think, for the very first one. But every year since then, it's been my pleasure to be a part of this, first as a participant and then on various panels. And now it's my honor to facilitate this panel on community renewable energy, which is a topic that I know many folks on this call have worked on. It's something that VPIRG, the organization I work for, has pursued policies in support of for a long time. And it's something that we hope to create new opportunities for going forward. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Just so folks know, I'm going to be doing just a little bit of a presentation myself, taking sort of facilitator's prerogative before we get to the main event. I'm going to be talking about the renewable energy standard and the need for new renewables broadly, and how the renewable energy standard being updated could really create some new opportunities for community renewable energy. And also we'll be just touching very briefly on the Inflation Reduction Act, which I know folks are familiar with, and some of our other panelists are going to be talking about in just a little bit more detail as well. So without further ado, I think I have permission to do this. Here we go. All right. Sorry, bear with me here for a second. There we go. There's presentation mode. So today we're talking about community renewable energy, a lot of different potential ownership models for that, some of which will be covered here today. I'm joined by Molly Smith Dunn of Vermont Law School and the Hartford Energy Committee, Chris Heine from the Department of Public Service, who's really focused on community renewable energy there, and then Doc Bagley from the Stratford Energy Committee and the Stratford Community Solar Project. So like I said, I wanted to start just by briefly setting the table, talking about energy policy, electricity policy in Vermont, in particular the Renewable Energy Standard, which was passed in 2015, hasn't been updated since then. VPIRG is one of the organizations that thinks it's about time. And I know there's a lot of interest in that update in the State House, which is to say with Vermont elected officials and amongst climate activists and organizations in Vermont. So let me just briefly describe what this is. I think most people probably know at a high level what the Renewable Energy Standard Vermont requires. So I'll be brief. By 2032, it requires that Vermont electric utilities provide 75% of the power that they're getting to their customers from renewable energy, renewable electricity. That 75% can be met with essentially any renewable electricity that's deliverable to New England. Big, small, old, new, any technology that's allowable under Vermont law, which is most that are considered renewable. And that is mostly being met through renewable energy credits from older out-of-state facilities, especially hydro facilities. And that's essentially because those are the cheapest renewables that are on the market right now, dams that have been around for ages and are going to probably keep on operating whether or not we pay them a little bit more for the fact that they're renewable. The second thing that it does is it requires 10% of electricity in 2032 and ramping up between here and there to be from in-state renewable energy up to 5 megawatts that's newly built after the middle of 2015. And that 10% I should note is a sort of a part of the 75%. So it's 10% new in Vermont, 65% sort of anything goes as far as renewables to get to that 75% by 2032. But the real benefit of the Renewable Energy Standard, the most significant thing that it does is it requires construction of new renewables to meet that 10%. Now, that's good. It's actually, and at the time that it passed, it was a fairly ambitious requirement for pretty small renewables in Vermont. But if you look at Vermont in terms of the requirements for new renewables that we have, we are the lowest in New England in terms of the requirement for new renewables. If you look at total renewables, including the old stuff that's probably, again, going to operate regardless, we look okay regionally. But the new renewable stuff, if you think about climate, that's really where the action is. If you think about an energy policy, an electricity policy, if it's getting new renewables built, it is reducing carbon pollution. Globally, that's what we need to do. We need to build more renewable electricity in order to reduce carbon pollution. If we're supporting renewables that exist today, certainly there's a value in that, but it is not the same as getting new renewables built. And that's why we're so focused on that new renewables number. And really think there's an opportunity to require more new renewables. And that would really provide an opportunity both to cut carbon pollution, create economic benefit here in Vermont, and certainly on the topic that we're talking about today, and that I'll shift to our panelists on in a couple of minutes to fill you in a lot more on community renewables, creating a much bigger opening for new renewable construction will create, if it's designed well, a much bigger opening for community renewables as well. And we think that's incredibly important. Vermont is also near the bottom of the list, almost at the very bottom of the list in terms of the total percentage of energy that we're producing relative to the percentage of energy, the amount of energy we're using in state. And that's a real issue from an environmental justice standpoint, from an energy security or energy independence standpoint, from an economic development standpoint. We really could be producing a lot more of our own electricity here in Vermont. And from where VPERG's standing, we really have a responsibility to do that and do it renewably. And we have an opportunity to do that. And again, if we were doing a lot more of that, it would create a much bigger opportunity for these kinds of community renewable projects. I also wanted to mention, again, briefly, the Inflation Reduction Act. So the Inflation Reduction Act, as folks probably know, had some really substantial tax credits for the deployment of renewable electricity across the nation. It extended the renewable electricity tax credits that existed at the time of the passage, bumped them back up to that 30% of the total project cost level and extended that for another decade. It also created additional levels of tax credit, additional 10%, 20%, 30%, depending on where you are and who you're building a project for. If you're building in like a low income community, for instance, you can get an additional 10%. Some would see, even more than that. For instance, a project that's supporting affordable housing could see a 50% tax credit. And it also created, for the first time ever, a direct payment option for entities that don't really have a tax appetite, to use the the lingo in the financial sector, nonprofits, school districts, municipalities. Essentially, this turns into a grant. And that could be enormously beneficial for community renewable energy as we're trying to get more of that built out. For these entities that never could take advantage of the tax credit, had to find some sort of third-party financing, someone else with tax appetite to try to work around the system. Now the system's actually designed for those kinds of projects to be able to be built. And obviously this would come with a really significant benefit in terms of local jobs, local economic activity. Last thing I wanted to mention is right now, the cost of natural gas, which is where additional electricity is going to come from if we're not building more renewables, is sky high, and that is expected to continue for years. So if you look at the cost of a new solar facility, again, which is what a lot of these community renewable energy projects would be, versus the cost of new gas electricity, new solar is cheaper and more stably priced than gas, just like right from the jump. And that is incredibly important as we're looking at equity, at how to make sure that Vermonters are insulated from the kind of price shocks that so many people around the country and around the world are seeing in the electric sector. So more new renewables isn't just good from environmental justice standpoint, climate standpoint, it's also financially the right call in broad terms. I'm going to wrap, but I did want to say, you'll see the little Renewable Energy Vermont logo down here in the bottom left. I borrowed most of these slides from Rev. They're doing presentations, I know, with a lot of town energy committees, so maybe this is familiar to a lot of you already. Talking about the real need to get more new renewables in Vermont built. Thought about making my own slides, but they have most of the data that I was looking for anyway, so figured why reinvent the wheel. Last thing I wanted to note before I turn it over to our panelists is on January 9th at noon, I will be joining a few others, including, I'm sure, Joanna Miller from VNRC, who you all know and love, for a webinar to get into this, into the Affordable Heat Act, into other legislative priorities in a lot more detail. So save the date. We'll be sending around the link. I think Greta might even be able to drop it in the chat right now. I hope you will be able to join us for that as well and spread the word with your friends and colleagues. So next up, we have Molly Smith from Vermont Law School. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. Give me a moment. I'm going to try and share my screen here. Let's see. Right. Okay, so again, good afternoon. I'm Molly Smith Dunn. I sit on the Hartford Energy Commission, and I also work out at the Institute for Energy and the Environment at Vermont Law and Graduate School. And I'm here today to talk about opportunities for local renewable energy generation programs, specifically in Hartford, and to talk to you all a little bit about what an energy committee or commission can do in this realm. So before I dive sort of too much more into Hartford specific projects, I want to give you a brief overview of the commission and who we are. So at the moment, we are a 6-member commission, although we do have room for a 7th. So any Hartford residents out there looking to get involved with energy issues, please contact me. We are all volunteers. So while we do get a budget from the town for things like going to conferences or printing, we don't get compensated for our personal time. I mention that because I think it's really important to recognize that all the work we do is done on volunteer time and effort. And given the majority of us are either students or work full-time jobs, time is precious. And we don't have a lot of it. So we're careful to prioritize what we can do with the time and resources we have. And it's also a way of saying that if we can find a way to do things, you can too. So some projects that the Hartford Energy Commission has undertaken in the past include a hugely successful window dressers build, which just concluded last month. We've done an e-bike lending library in the spring of 21. A few drive electric vehicle showcases. We published the Driving Electric in the Upper Valley Guide, and the Energy Commission has also attended various town-sponsored events, such as the Hartford Community Coalition Block Party and Trunk or Treat events, at which we pass out things like LED light bulbs, power strips, and information on low-cost ways to save energy. During the pandemic, we also wrote a monthly newsletter, which got published on the Hartford website, all about ways to save energy, raise awareness about energy-related issues. So climate work and renewable energy development is a really kind of daunting topic, and it can be hard to decide where to start. In Hartford, we have had an energy chapter of our town plan for several years, which has given us some direction in terms of program and reach. However, in 2020, the town obtained funds to hire a consultant to create an entire climate action plan. We spent a year working with the newly formed Climate Advisory Committee, as well as our consultant, Pale Blue Dot, as well as members of the public and other commissions around Hartford to develop the plan and strategies and the goals within it. And the select board approved the plan in 2021. So the plan is comprised of chapters, and the Energy Commission in particular is responsible for the first 2 you see here, although we do consult on the other ones. Our 2 specific chapters are the buildings and energy and the transportation and land use. So each of those chapters contains a list of strategies based off of the town history and future emission reduction target goals. I really can't emphasize how helpful it is to have a climate action plan like this, or even just a town energy chapter, as it really does help give commissions and committees a direction and metrics by which to plan projects and gauge success. So when it comes to actually developing renewables in Hartford, we're really talking about solar, and we're talking about it for the purposes of electrification. At least that's what I'm going to limit my discussion to. The majority of Hartford sources its electricity from Green Mountain Power, and its energy mix is already 100% carbon-free and 68% renewable. Granted, those numbers are helped by GMP sourcing a lot of their power from Hydro-Quebec, which has some issues I'm not going to get into here too much, but my point is, by electrifying sources previously powered by oil, propane, and coal, we can really drastically reduce Hartford's greenhouse gas emissions. And there are two ways that we develop solar in Hartford. The first is by focusing on individual adoption by way of rooftop solar and ground-mounted arrays, and also by helping the town itself create policies which would incentivize construction of solar or require new construction of buildings or retrofits to be solar ready. When it comes to actually developing renewable solar on the individual level, we can't make people put solar on their homes, but what we can do as a commission is talk to people, neighbor to neighbor, about the benefits of solar and how to afford a rooftop or a ground-mounted system and what incentives are available. This type of work fulfills several strategies laid out in our climate action plan, such as increasing on-site distributed renewable energy from 3% as of 2019 of residential and commercial electric use to 15% by 2030, and also achieving 30% residential, commercial, and industrial building thermal fuel switching, quite a mouthful, to a renewable source by 2030. So to do this, we are actually in the early stages of planning a Solarize campaign, which we hope to launch in 2023. And I went a little far with my slides here, so I'm going back here. So Solarize is a program focused on increasing residential solar adoption in the form of rooftop or ground-mounted systems. We do this through a public outreach campaign and partnership with local solar developers. So we're just in the beginning phases of planning this project, but so far the Commission's plan is to run an outreach and awareness campaign through the first few months of 2023, and then it would culminate in an in-person energy fair event where residents who maybe are interested in solar, who have questions, can come and talk directly with contractors on options and opportunities for them to get solar on their properties. We're also planning on inviting nonprofits such as Vital Communities, Drive Electric Vermont, and Efficiency Vermont to come and talk to folks about incentives and financing on energy projects and how to apply them. We're also hoping to have some Vermont law and graduate students, energy students, come to talk about some energy basics like, what is a REC? What happens if you sell or keep your RECs? What are the tax benefits of going solar? How do you apply for tax incentives, et cetera? The event would also educate and provide sign-up opportunities for event like window dressers, the newly announced WRAP program, which is a new weatherization program soon to be offered through utilities such as GMP and some other energy efficiency programs. This type of event is a pretty heavy lift for an energy commission, as it involves a tremendous amount of planning, a lot of recruitment. So we'll be spending the majority of our spring doing research, creating materials for attendees, as well as recruiting participants, finding a space to actually hold the event, et cetera. Another objective of the Solarize program is to gauge community interest in a potential future community solar array. So many families in Hartford, especially those in the low income community, live in either rented housing or otherwise can't afford rooftop or ground mounted solar, but still might be interested in the benefits that come from a share in a solar array. So at Vermont Law and Graduate School, we often work with communities, often again low income, in establishing community solar arrays where residents can buy into a section of that array. If there is interest in this type of project in Hartford, as we would glean from the energy event in the spring, we would then work hopefully on a partnership between Vermont Law and Graduate School and the town of Hartford to look for some land, think about a land lease. And I believe the specifics of that type of project are going to be gone over by Doc Bagley a little later on in this presentation. So I've talked a little bit about what the commission is doing from sort of a public outreach and education side when it comes to developing renewables. So I'm going to turn a little bit to what we're doing on the internal municipal facing side. So like several other towns in the Upper Valley right now, we actually in Hartford don't have a permanent town manager. We have a temporary. So the scope of what we can do from a town perspective is a little bit limited. So lately, we do get the occasional solar developer that comes to the Energy Commission and asks for a letter of support from us to establish a large-scale array that they would want to develop within the town boundary. When we get these types of requests, the Energy Commission will get together, we'll take a look at the site and see whether it qualifies as a preferred site under the rules established by the energy chapter of our own plan. We'll then have a discussion amongst ourselves to gauge our support for the project or based on the site. Projects are more likely to get our support if the recs are kept within the state or the land is used for dual use, such as animal grazing or pollinator habitat. We'll then write a letter either supporting or not supporting the project, which would eventually go to the PUC. However, that's sort of the point at which our real authority stops. The best we can really do is advise, as the proposal's next stop is to the Planning Commission. And currently we have some folks on the Hartford Planning Commission who won't support a solar project if it involves any kind of clear cutting of trees. So that makes it pretty difficult to establish large-scale solar arrays in the town, but we're hoping to do some internal education about tree clearing for solar siting during the Solarize campaign next year. So another thing that we've been able to do is work with students, again, at Vermont Law and Graduate School to create a way for the Energy Commission to uniformly evaluate RFPs or request for proposals for potential future solar projects. Given the influx of ARPA dollars, as well as the Inflation Reduction Act, which I know we're going to talk a bit more about later, we're hopeful that with our environmental sustainability coordinator, Dana Clausen's help, we'll be able to get some funds to do some projects in line with our climate action plan, like maybe getting some solar on town buildings, working with the local school to get some on there, or the local senior center. However, once we do obtain funds, we need to put out an RFP to find a developer to do it. And the town requires we be able to explain why we chose the vendor we did, which means we need a uniform way of assessing these RFPs. So in September of this past year, we began working with students at VLGS to create an evaluation matrix for us to help look at these proposals. So this matrix works by assigning a number to our personal, our climate action plan values, and then scoring potential RFPs against those numbers. As you can see on the left side here are some examples of potential projects that we could get, some proposals, and then scored on the matrix with a final score on the far right. We are hopeful that we'll be able to share this matrix with other towns in the near future, as we hope that it would be helpful to them and to be consistent with evaluation methods. We also think that there could be other uses for this matrix, like evaluating preferred vendors and other solar installers. In addition to their help with this matrix, another group of students at VLGS is conducting research for us on areas in which our town charter might be amended to be a bit more climate and energy friendly, make it a bit easier or streamline processes for getting solar, or making it a bit more clear what is meant by a preferred site. So when it comes to proposing new policies, such as requiring new construction in the town to be net zero, or renovations requiring a permit to be net zero or solar compatible, we really need to have a select board and a town manager working with us. And given all the recent turnover in the town, this type of project has taken a little bit of a backseat in Hartford. However, once things stabilize a bit, we're hoping to start working closely with a new town manager, the select board, and other stakeholders on proposing some new codes and policies, which would be in line with our climate action plan. But again, given our climate action plan is almost 150 pages long, and there's only so much that we can do, and we have to be very intentional about the types of projects that we can realistically take on. We have the capacity to do only so much, and we have to accept that at the end of the day, all we can do is what we can do. So looking at the bigger picture a little bit and thinking about what other energy commissions and committees can do to advance renewable energy development in Vermont, I think if you were to ask 30 different people that question, you'd get at least 30 different answers. But from my perspective, having been on the front lines of this work in Hartford for going on 4 years now, I think there are a few things that most committees or commissions can do right away. And perhaps one of the easiest of these to do is simply educate. When people get solar on their home but don't know what a REC is, that's a problem. When people don't install a heat pump because they don't know that it's also an AC unit and a dehumidifier, that's also a problem. When folks buy an F-150 because they don't trust the technology of the new EVs, that's a problem. So just throwing a pamphlet out there isn't exactly an answer either. We really need to meet residents where they're at, actually take time to talk, answer questions neighbor to neighbor, and build trust within the community about these issues, and hopefully help folks begin to make those lifestyle changes that can result in a big climate impact. Having a window dressers style community build is a fantastic way to bring the community together around energy issues, let neighbor meet neighbor, build some camaraderie here. Holding a Drive Electric Week event or a Solarize campaign where folks who have already adopted a new technology, such as an EV or have solar, getting them all together with folks who maybe are interested in it to share their experiences can also be super helpful. Towns also don't have to do this alone. Partner with another local nonprofit or another local town to combine skills and support each other. It doesn't take just a village, sometimes it takes two. Another thing towns can do, but would require a few more resources, would be to hire an energy coordinator. At the moment, we are exceptionally lucky to have the wonderful Dana Clausen working as our environmental sustainability coordinator. We adore Dana. He does a tremendous amount for us and sort of acts as a conduit between the select board and the town to the Energy Commission. However, Dana is just one person. We need about 6 of him in order to get sort of all of our goals done. But volunteers are also absolutely fantastic. But again, we do this in our spare time, and many of us are already working a full-time job or two. So at the end of the day, if it came down to volunteering at a window dressers build or staying to pull an extra shift at work, several of us might have to pick the latter option. So having a paid member of staff working on energy issues from both a municipal and public-facing perspective could help save a lot of both money and energy. So I'm going to leave you all with this quote. It's a little cheesy, but I think about it a lot, especially when I'm sort of overwhelmed by how far we have to go and the lack of stable resources and time that we all have. And it's this quote by Margaret Mead, and it goes, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that has." And I think about this quote and remember that even the best we do can vary from day to day, but as long as we continue to do our best, we're doing pretty okay. Please feel free to contact me if you have questions. Again, my email information is up there at the top. And I think these resources are going to get passed around at the end of this. But there's some links to our climate action plan, the window dressers program, the Energy Commission, and other things. So I'm going to stop there, and thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Molly. I really appreciate you including that Margaret Mead quote, definitely words to live by. Next, we've got Chris Heine, who is going to fill us in on a little bit more about what the Department of Public Service in particular is doing to advance community renewables. Go for it, Chris.
Okay, hold on one second. Get my show up. Good afternoon. Yeah, my name is Chris Heine. With the Public Service Department, where I am the Clean Energy Program Specialist. I'm going to talk to you about the Affordable Community Renewable Energy Program that I've been working on here for about a year. And there we go. I'm going to run through the background and goals of the program. I'll briefly talk about the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, the impacts that had on program design, and the benefits of the programs that will be funded by AGR. The concept of an affordable community scale renewable energy program was included in Governor Scott's budget proposal for fiscal year 2022. The department began having discussions exploring program design shortly thereafter. And as part of the 2022 fiscal year Vermont budget in Act 74 of 2021, the department received $10 million of ARPA funding to be used on the Affordable Community Scale Renewable Energy Program, consistent with the parameters of the Clean Energy Development Fund, to support the creation of renewable energy projects for Vermonters with low income. The goals for the program were and remain focused on improving access to clean distributed energy for Vermonters from all walks of life, and especially for those who have historically been left out of the clean energy transition, while also reducing the energy burden of those who are most vulnerable. We wanted to meet those goals while also avoiding cost shift and cross-subsidization to the extent possible. This was also viewed as an opportunity to explore different methods and mechanisms that may offer alternatives to net metering that can attract investment and offer a good benefit. The goals of the American Rescue Plan Act were to offer economic recovery to those who were most impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. ARPA funding could be invested in infrastructure needs that spurred economic development and investment in climate change prevention and mitigation measures. There are many ARPA requirements. These three had probably the most impact on our program design. Funds are considered obligated once they are destined or defined for a defined program or project, and funds are expended when the projects are complete or programs are operational. The final rule for the state and local fiscal recovery funding set 185% of federal poverty level as the definition for low income. The initial acre design included plans for a statewide program with the formation of a DU group made up of participating distribution utilities. ARPA funding would go to the investment of a community scale project in the neighborhood of 4 megawatts. The generation from that project would be monetized and delivered to low income recipients as non-bill credit for the life of the project. Participating DUs would pay into a fund supporting the expansion of the program over time. This initial design was considered a high risk for ARPA compliance issues. Those impacted by the pandemic wouldn't be receiving an asset. For instance, the Public Service Department could hand a recipient a check for the amount equal to what they would receive in bill credits over time, but they would be able to spend that money from the check as they pleased. They wouldn't have any substantial agency with bill credits. The duration of the benefit was also problematic. The funding would not be expended and received by the recipient before the end of 2026. So this sent us back to, have to redesign a bit. The program redesign, as you can see, retains some of the features of the original. The design still included the statewide structure with participating DUs forming a group. Megawatt scale projects were still part of that plan to take advantage of the economies of scale. And the proposal that participating DUs fund future programming was also still part of that 2.0 design. Instead of investing the ARPA funding into solar projects, however, the DU group would contract PPAs with developers for generation projects. As part of the contract agreements, for those contracts, the ARPA funding would be used as an upfront payment to pre-buy power for 7 years. This third-party structure would buy energy rather than buying a solar project itself, increasing the amount of solar installed from the program funding. This would also meet the ARPA requirement that funds be expended prior to the end of 2026. Memberships were also a key change in the program redesign. A membership would be granted to impacted households that could be transferred to other income qualifying utility customers or taken with a customer if they moved, giving it a level of tangibility that met ARPA guidelines. The membership is the benefit. The bill credits are a consequence of the membership. While the projects would be developed, the DU group would fill memberships so that the requirement for funds being obligated would be met. And so then when the generation came online, credits would start flowing immediately to those members. While this program was ARPA eligible, there was varying levels of interest and participation in the program from the DUs. There were also significant power supply issues that were expressed from the distribution utilities, particularly wheeling from one distribution area to another, how to manage other attributes that come with power supply. So following discussions about that design, the department issued an RFP for the design of acre-funded programs instead. The RFP required that the programs meet the funding obligation and expenditure requirements of ARPA. The recipients meet the applicable income eligibility requirements for disproportionately impacted households, and that the program offer memberships with the characteristics of a fungible asset. It was also required that generation projects associated with the program be new, commissioned following the date that the legislation took effect on July 1st, 2021, to meet the statutory language. From the RFP, we received proposals for 4 different programs that offer different mechanisms to benefit impacted households. They all offer long-term value with credits ranging from $12 to $45 per month, and together will serve thousands of Vermonters. Each program will increase equity in the renewable energy transition, and they all explore innovative ways to deliver energy assistance. I'll go through these fairly quickly, but we received one proposal from VIPSA that basically does a lot of services for the small municipal utilities in the state. Their program offers participants a 6-cent block of energy for up to 200 kilowatt hours per month. The savings, depending on which DU that a member would be in, is between $12 and $26 per month. The participants in this program will receive a 10-year membership. The generation project for this is a yet to be developed solar and storage project planned to be built in Barton with an expected commissioning date of 2024. The expectation is this that will serve about 700 municipal electric customers. Vermont Electric Co-op and Washington Electric Co-op paired to put together the Cooperative Renewable Energy Invitation Program. This will provide participants with a $45 per month bill on their credit. That credit will be good for 5 years. The energy from this program will come from VEC's existing 2.2, it may actually be 2.3 megawatt solar installation at the Jericho landfill. The program will serve an estimated 950 co-op members. In addition to serving their members, this program's going to be, I guess, what I would call a capital R renewable project. They're going to retire the RECs above and beyond the co-op's res compliance requirements, really making this a a high level of additionality for a solar project. The Village of Moscow Community Renewable Energy Project is Stowe Electric Department's proposal. They're planning on offering a 12.5% to 25% discount to those that are eligible to take part. The energy from this program is to come from a proposed 3.5 megawatt Outback Acres solar project. It's to be located in Pittsford. The next expected 2023 commissioning date. Stowe Electric also has a plan to install solar and to commission their hydro dam at their headquarters in Moscow Village in Stowe. And if they're able to get those commissioned prior to the end of 2024, Stowe proposes moving the program's generation source to that location. The expectation is Stowe's program could serve 200 customers or more. And finally, GMP is planning on offering a 6-cent discount for consumed energy. It's going to be based on a consumption block of 100 to 600 kilowatts per month based on the participant's consumption. GMP will offer 2% or 2 cents, I'm sorry, for the discount with acre funding supplements of 4 cents. So that's where that 6 cent will come from. Projects are in different stages of development throughout GMP's service territory. The expectation is this could serve as many as 6,000 customers. And in addition, this will not preclude people from taking advantage of GMP's Electric Assistance Program, which already offers their customers a 25% discount. So if you'd like to get more information, we'll be posting some information on our website, publicservice.vermont.gov soon. And certainly feel free to reach out to me directly if you have any questions. I'll also take a moment to plug for the department's public engagement plan. We're going through the process of setting up public engagement throughout 2023. We're firming up dates for Q1 for some informational webinars. And if you want to reach out to us directly, that can be done at psd.reprograms@vermont.gov. And also feel free to check out more information about the engagement plan itself at publicservice.vermont.gov /renewables. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. We have 45 minutes left. Obviously, Doc still needs to go, and he's up next. I'm just going to take facilitator's prerogative, though, and ask a few quick clarifying questions of Chris that were dropped in the chat. Mostly, we're holding questions till the end. If you haven't had a question answered, that's why. But there are a few that are just really clarifying questions. And I'll just actually let me answer one quickly myself, because I'm sure the answer. Do all of these different programs, are they all income qualified? And the answer is yes, they have to be for ARPA.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other three, Chris, quickly are the electric utilities helping publicize these? Number two is, what happens if an individual customer's status changes, like their income goes up in year 2? Do they get kicked out of the program or something? And then number three is, just to clarify, each of these programs is only available to customers of the utilities that were described in the individual program. Is that right?
Yes. So Washington Electric and VEC's customers would be eligible for that one program that is put on by both of them. Because of ARPA rules, when a customer gets enrolled in these programs, they have ownership of that and will hold on to that regardless of changes in their income. it's again, kind of using the analogy of a check. If we were to hand you a check for COVID relief, you wouldn't be asked to return that check at the as your income goes up. I'm sorry, I forgot your first question.
And I assume that the electric utilities are helping publicize these programs.
Yeah. So we've actually just sent out grant award letters in the last couple of days. So I think you'll be seeing, certainly VEC is going to be ready to go shortly. I think they have to. We've got to work through the grant agreements at this point, but they have a project already in place, and I imagine GEMP will be quickly following with Stowe and the municipal utilities maybe a year or so out.
Got it. That's great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
So again, there'll definitely be lots of time. We have until 1:30 for this, for questions, and we can come back to other questions about the specific presentations. But those I wanted to just get out there because they're quick clarifying ones. So next up, we've got Doc Bagley from the Stratford Energy Committee. Take it away, Doc.
Yeah, hi all. I'm just going to go through what we went through as an energy committee, partnering with the Vermont Law School Energy Clinic in pursuing a 150 kWAC community solar project here in Stratford. It started off really with the Energy Committee chair at the time sending out a notice via listserv to anyone that had property that might be interested in housing a community solar project with incentives of either payments, percentage of payment from the array's output, or a flat out lease payment on a yearly basis from the contractor. We had about 4 homeowners respond. The Energy Clinic members, including students, our regional energy coordinator, Jeff Martin at the time out of Two Rivers, out of Quechee, and various members of the Stratford Energy and Climate Committee did some site visits just to do an initial assessment of the properties. 2 sites were deemed viable for 150 kW, and RFPs were drafted by the law school to be posted, and 3 companies responded. These postings were done primarily through Renewable Energy Vermont's website and word of mouth with certain local solar companies. As I said, 3 companies responded and did site visits, again, with members of the law school and myself and the regional energy coordinator. 1 decided not to quote, another stuck with their model for community solar, and 1 complied with the law school's model per the RFP, the request for proposal. And the law school's model, the Energy Clinic's model, is primarily retaining the renewable energy credits. And we can get into a discussion about that maybe at the end, because oftentimes that can take over any conversation about solar when we get too much into the weeds. But basically what it did was reduce the net metering value by 4 cents a kilowatt hour in doing that. And basically the RECs are the green attributes associated with renewable energy projects, and allows an entity, whether it's an individual or a company, to claim 100% renewable energy and not be just a part of the utility blend, if you will. And so because of the process normally done by the solar contractor that was done by the Vermont Law School Energy Clinic, the cost per kW was lower than it might have been otherwise. And as a note, overall, the Energy Clinic did quite a bit of work on this project and a lot of the engineering processes and all the applications. So they provided Zoom presentations by the students, and I'd say there were about 3 or 4 of those in the course of getting people signed up. They provided a system financial analysis worksheet that we handed out to folks so they had an understanding of what the costs were and what the benefits were beyond the renewable side, including the financial aspects. They drafted the request for proposal going out to contractors. They drafted the design and construction agreement between the Stratford Community Solar LLC and Catamount Solar, who was the chosen installer. They did the entire certificate of public good filing, including engineering for the site with initial site plans, and gave some seed funds that were available through building a local economy over in South Royalton, made those available for the engineering elements of the CPG in this project. They also provided legal services pro bono. They provided the landowner lease agreement paperwork. They filed with the state for LLC registration, and have drafted the LLC operating agreement to be signed by members. So with input from our regional energy coordinator, members of our energy committee, and Catamount Solar. So quite a bit of work done by the law school, and it was a great partnership and great to be working with them. So announcements were made on the local and then regional listservs, plus postings at the general store, library, town office, energy committee outreach by Two Rivers, Ottaquechee Regional Commission, and from that, we had presentations with the information. These presentations were done primarily by the law students that were part of the energy clinic for that particular semester. They were on board and really are there for the education of how solar and community solar works. So it's turned over to them to do a lot of research and make presentations to fully understand what the process is here in Vermont anyway. After presentations, we pursued preferred site status with the town and the regional commission, Two Rivers. It was initiated and approved by Two Rivers after they reviewed preliminary site data. And then a presentation was made to both the select board and the planning commission in a dual meeting. And then a vote was done. And getting this preferred site status basically prevented an additional 1 cent reduction in our kilowatt hour adder, if you will, to the benefits of the solar financially. So at those meetings in the preferred site status, 2 sites were passed, and it was decided via the economics and the contractors that 1 site would be pursued now, possibly the 2nd site later. The presentations initially gave preference to Stratford residents, and then at a certain time frame, an announcement was made that membership could go out to anyone within the Green Mountain Power territory. And that's one of the beauties of community solar. As long as you're within the utility where the system's installed, you can benefit from that regardless of where you live. I made up an Excel proposal form with information from Catamount and others so that we could quote based on information that individuals would give us for their usage from the in kilowatt hours from GMP. And from this proposal, they could decide what percentage of their usage and future usage would be from the community solar array. And this proposal also included electric vehicle charging and heat pumps, that we could add in some numbers that if somebody didn't have heat pumps yet or an electric vehicle, we could have discussions with them about, how many miles do you expect to drive, and have you been quoted heat pumps? What size home do you have? We would make some generalizations and try to size based on future loads, not just current loads. The systems that were quoted out in DC kilowatts versus AC. That's sort of the industry standard. And for 150 kW AC output, Catamount proposed just over 223 kW DC. And I can get into the conversions, but generally inverters can take a larger amount of DC input for their rated AC output, and it increases the performance curve, if you will, of that particular inverter. So, and there's parameters within the design of inverters to allow for a certain over input beyond the AC output. And I can get into that if somebody has questions later. Once proposals went out, customers signed the proposal and sent a check for 6%, $6 per kilowatt DC. And this was just a small amount to lock in those particular people and commit them to the array. They were not committed to the point where they couldn't back out if something came up, but it put a little skin in the game and allowed us to pay for some fees that that the law school incurred in the process of doing what they do. A certificate of public good, as I said, was drafted by the law school, and it was submitted to the PUC with a 45-day comment period. All this information is provided to all land abutters to the property where the array is being installed. So they have 45 days to comment, ask questions. Being on the Energy Committee and knowing a lot of the people that were getting involved and showing interest, I called many of them just to answer any questions they might have, but certainly I called all the abutters just to see what their concerns might be and what their take was on having a community solar on an adjacent property. And especially the property that we went with, I think there were a total of 6 abutters, and none of which had a problem with it once their questions were answered and they had an understanding of where it was going and all that. Once the certificate of public good was approved, once a CPG is approved, we have a year to complete the installation. And we can also file for an extension if needed. There's a lot of supply chain issues going on in the solar industry right now, primarily in switchgear equipment necessary for interconnection with the utilities. So there's a chance that this and other projects will go to the PUC requesting an extension. We're hoping to have this completed by March of 2023 within the PUC's CPG requirements. So we'll see how that all plays out. At the same time, a land lease agreement was signed between the Stratford Community Solar LLC, excuse me, and the landowners. And with this particular project, their compensation was a percentage of the production, total production of the array. After 80% of the system was committed by joining members, Catamount and the Stratford Community Solar LLC signed a design and construction agreement, and Catamount invoiced the members 70% of the total cost that was incurred for them to become members. At the same time, 2 members of the LLC were listed as registered agents as part of the LLC so that we could apply for a federal tax ID number. And once we received that number, we were able to open a bank account for the LLC so that we could put funds in there for any initial cost. And that will be also an account where yearly maintenance fees, if you will, that are incurred for each member will go into that account. Catamount at this time was working on a final design based on the site evaluation by the racking company. They come in and they spec out what the soils are and how the racking is going to be designed, and then it goes into a final build. Once that's all taken place, racking is delivered to the site and the installation starts to take place. Racking and panels are currently in place, and conduit runs are in, and utility pole is in, and we're just waiting for additional equipment to come to site. And then we'll be able to commission once everything is completed. I don't know, Ben, am I still hanging in there time-wise? How much do I have here?
I think you should take a couple of minutes to wrap up, but I definitely want to make
Okay.
sure that we have time to get to questions.
Sure. We make a point of updating the members on a monthly basis, at least every month. Taking pictures of what's going on at the site is helpful, just so we can answer any questions that they may have before they happen. Once the system is completed and commissioned, Catamount will collect the remaining 30% of the cost of the system by the members. Final PUC paperwork will be filed. The LLC will work on setting up meetings for operations and moving forward. There's 3 agents within the LLC, a registered agent, which I am at this point, a secretary and treasurer. It's just a formality of being an LLC operating this system. It's a member-owned system. It was instrumental in keeping the costs down as well, because the cost from Catamount went directly to the members without anybody in the middle. Just to wrap up, I would say some of the benefits here, if a member is in a GMP territory and they decide to move, as long as they're in GMP's territory, they can continue to use their community solar credits. They can sell them within the community solar group or outside with approval from the LLC. If you're a renter, you can also take advantage of this within the utility, which is renters have a hard time with renewable energy otherwise. And I'll just say here that I really can't give tax advice, and that seems to be what most people say about the tax credits. But we were lucky in that when we started this project, we were at 26% for federal tax credit. And we were concerned about going into 2023 because it was going to shift to 22%. And then the investment or the Inflation Reduction Act came along and bumped it back up to 30% for both this year and the following 10 years. So That was a benefit that we didn't see. And then the blended rate from the utility, which they base the production dollars, if you will, in the credits has gone up a little bit, and as has the residential rate, but the blended rate, it's gone up more than the residential rate. So another benefit. I won't drag on any further, but if you have any questions, just email me, docbagley@gmail.com. I do have, see if I can bring it up for you. I do have a links page that will be supplied to VCAN, and they will send it out to all the participants. And these links may be helpful for you to understand and to both the Energy Clinic, Green Mountain Power's rate structure, installers, the REV installer list, Renewable Energy Vermont. You can then go to that site and find out, who's doing solar and what types of solar, if you're looking to send out proposals. Our regional commission, Two Rivers Ottaquechee, their website is helpful as well. So,
Doc, I'm going to jump in here and steer us to questions. These look like incredible resources, and thank you for collecting them. I know for folks who don't know, we were chatting, panelists a little bit offline and lamenting how difficult it is to find some of this information. So I appreciate you pulling this together.
Sure.
I think just so everyone can see all the panelists, could you stop sharing your screen for the Q&A portion? We still have a good 20 plus minutes, so we'll definitely be able to get to a bunch of questions. And then just a reminder, if you've got a question in mind, you haven't already put it out there. And I know a lot of the folks on this call, I've been at other meetings and conferences with you, so I know there's got to be some more questions out there. Please drop them in the chat. We'll do our best to get to all of them. We had, actually, let me just answer one up top, or there's a couple out there that I think I could quickly address. They're sort of meatier topics that you could have a whole panel on, but let me just take a stab at it. And then there are a few that I think Molly can take, and then we'll go from there. So the two that I wanted to address quickly were around solar and forest land, and carbon emissions from using any type of land for solar, and then what is being done to make sure we're actually seeing in carbon pollution reductions when solar is installed. So what I'd say to that is there's a lot of good data out there that shows very, very clearly that producing solar, even if you have to cut down trees or convert farmland, something like that, to do so is a massive net benefit from a carbon pollution standpoint. Now, that's not to say we should be, should not be thoughtful about where we're putting solar. VPIRG has been a strong supporter for nearly a decade of policies that would drive more solar development to rooftops, to parking lots, to landfills and brownfields and all the rest. But ultimately, we need a lot of energy to run a modern society, even if we're being incredibly frugal and efficient with our energy. And so in some cases, it is going to make sense to build in those kinds of places. And then the flip side, I'd say, is I've heard a lot about, oh, we just need to put it all up over parking lots, that sort of thing. That's great. We should do more of that. It does come at a literal financial cost. That's just one of the most expensive ways to build solar. And it also requires a lot more steel and concrete than solar, because you're basically building the scaffolding for a building over the parking lot in order to put the solar over the parking lot. And that comes at a carbon cost too, just like cutting down trees. So I would say it's all of the above and doing it as thoughtfully as we possibly can, but not taking things off the table because they have a downside. Every energy source has a downside, and we have a responsibility to do this as responsibly as we can, and here in Vermont as much as we can. And then in terms of making sure that we're actually capturing carbon pollution reductions, which is kind of the whole point of this, right? I would say the most important thing is making sure that all of our policies are actually pushing for requiring new renewables, that we're not building something here and then letting somebody else somewhere else in the world sort of take credit for it. And that really requires an update to our renewable energy standard. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but that's really, really important. And it requires a lot of action in the heating and transportation spaces, and to really pursue efficiency and conservation at the same time. So it's very much an all of the above strategy, even as we're deploying as much renewable electricity as fast as we possibly can. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Molly. There were a few questions that she sort of noted that she could touch on. One is specifically to her, the Solarize campaign she was describing. How much did it cost? A little bit more on the IRA, and then something called that is called Jevons paradox, which for folks who aren't familiar is basically the idea that when we use things more efficiently, sometimes we use more of them because we know it's more efficient. I have lots of thoughts on that, but I would love to hear Molly's.
Thanks, Ben. So the first question, it was about how much does it cost? And I wasn't sure if that referred to the Solarize campaign or our climate action plan. So I'll just answer both. So for the Solarize campaign, as yet, we don't have a cost in mind. Given our limited budget, we do try and keep things as cheap as possible. When we look for a space to hold events, we try and look for ones that are free. I'm expecting that the majority of our costs will come from printing materials, and those can come out of our budget. For the climate action plan, that was a little bit more expensive. It was around $60,000. It came from taxpayer dollars. So because of that, we had to get it was part of our climate resolution. We had to get approval to be able to use those funds for it. But our plan was to be able to prove that the energy savings would at least meet that, if not exceed it. And we also had to submit several RFPs from different consultants who would then work with us to write the plan. And we worked with our consultant, Pale Blue Dot, for about a year to create this, multiple meetings a month. So it was a group activity, I would say. The next question was, so Jevons paradox. So in addition to being, my full-time job at Vermont Law and Graduate School and being on the Energy Commission, I am also a part-time master's student working on a master's in energy regulation and law. So this idea is something that I think about quite a bit. And so, it's the idea that as things become more efficient, you're going to use more of it. So that's why when we look at renewable energy issues, we can't just think about getting, more solar or micro hydro or renewables in general. We have to think about the efficiency of the appliances that are using that energy. And ultimately, if we are using a hyper efficient tool or technology and it's being powered from a renewable source, that's sort of the ideal situation that we are looking for. And so there is no real, I can't give you a perfect answer. I can just tell you that we have this in mind, and that it's a two-prong approach to energy issues. Again, it's not just getting renewable energy everywhere. It's also making sure that the appliances that are using that renewable energy use it as efficiently as possible. The next question was, how can IRA funds be used to write a climate action plan? I am not familiar enough with the IRA to be able to say definitely it can or it cannot. However, I do have some suggestions. If you are able or were eligible, your community, for ARPA dollars may be used to hire a consultant to work on a climate action plan. In addition, partnering with local nonprofits, partnering with schools like University of Vermont, even Dartmouth has the Dartmouth Energy Alliance students look for projects like this. Contacting those schools, asking if the students want real world experience working on these types of projects is a great way to get a climate action plan, or at least the bare bones of one, made for low costs. And there was a couple other questions farther down about using the Vermont Law School's energy clinic, or whether we have any resources available to folks. So all of the services at the Institute for Energy and the Environment are pro bono. So it's through our clinic anyway. So we work with people like Doc and Stratford. We have another project coming up I believe in Tunbridge or nearby. That so all of that consulting work, our students do it for the experience. So that is all free. So if you are interested in partnering with us, contact me. But we also do have some materials on our website about how towns can work together to get community solar arrays up and running. But also, I mean, talking to people like Doc who've been through it, he's been through it, knows what's going on, would be a great resource for you as well. And I will stop there.
Thanks so much, Molly. I am going to go to a sort of a set of questions that I'll just paraphrase because there were 2 or 3 that were along the sort of same lines. Actually, let me read one of them that was specific, I think, Chris, to the projects you were describing. This is from Linda in Norwich. Given the PUC's record with approving even 500 kilowatt solar projects, I think she's referring to some of them being not permitted. Do you expect these megawatt sized projects to be approved? So that I think is sort of a question specifically for you, Chris, but then I just open that up to any of the panelists, because there were a couple other questions about the challenges that solar has faced in terms of energy generally, in Vermont renewable energy generally, in terms of permitting and the PUC process. If anyone has thoughts on those challenges, what we might do differently, certainly welcome those. And reminder, we've got 12 minutes left, so I'm hoping to get to at least one more question after this.
Yeah, short answer is yes. I think that these projects can get through the process. There's certainly megawatt scale projects going in with some regularity. I'm not exactly sure. I do certainly see a digest of what's going on the PUC, but don't generally have time to dive in too deep. But there are certainly megawatt projects going in the state.
Thanks, Chris. Anyone else want to chime in on, Molly or Doc permitting generally, or don't want to touch that? Okay. Well, I will say, and this is just me speaking for VPIRG. I definitely think it's been tightened up a little bit too much, maybe. That we really need to build. We need to build at scale, and we're seeing projects in some cases being rejected for pretty thin aesthetic considerations. Just to use one example, I definitely am interested in seeing some reforms to make it a little bit easier to build this stuff, because again, we got to always, and I find this helpful even myself. I certainly remind other people of this. We got to remind ourselves the alternative isn't nothing. The alternative is someone else somewhere else builds something else, or we keep on using something else that's already somewhere. And when we're talking about electricity, oftentimes that is a gas plant in a low-income community somewhere else in New England. So there are real downsides to rejecting renewables in Vermont on anything other than incredibly, incredibly strong grounds. I wanted to, if folks want to read the comment from Andrea from Vermont Electric Co-op in the chat, that I'm sure is good content. I'm going to try to get to more questions. Gary, I do see your hand. I wanted to ask one more question that already was posted in the chat, and then if we have a minute, if you have a brief question to ask, we can get to that. The question that I wanted to ask, though, is around cost shifting. There's a specific note about Washington Electric Co-op in here, but just generally speaking, there's been a narrative that if you build more solar, especially net metering, the people who are taking advantage of that are going to see cost savings, and other customers are going to see cost increases. I have a brief note I'll add on this, but I would love to hear any thoughts that any of the panelists have before I say more.
Yeah, I think from the department's point of view, there's certainly benefits to net metering, but there will be cost shifts at some point. I mean, it's anything that, you know, is being sold back to the retailer at retail rate, when it comes to electricity, will eventually have to be recouped somewhere else, and generally that falls on other ratepayers. So that's just the way the energy system is kind of built. So
Also, as DERs, or distributed energy resources like batteries, become more popular and more affordable for homes, people can then start, instead of, you know, if they have solar on their homes, instead of selling that power back to the grid, they can store it. And that will also a couple of studies have shown that that will have potential to help reduce issues of cost shifting.
I'll also add, and then looks like we will have time for a quick question from Gary, and maybe one or two more after that. That, you know, a lot of this is sort of the balancing act that you have to do when you're trying to, you know, build out an energy system. If you look at the kind of conversation about electricity and renewable electricity in Vermont, you hear a lot of things that I think everyone would like. Everyone would like all of these to be possible all at once, but they do sort of pull in different directions sometimes. Like, you know, we shouldn't build in fields. We should only build on landfills, parking lots, rooftops, etc. Okay, that's great. That's good from a land use standpoint. I get it, but that oftentimes comes with higher costs. Landfills, parking lots, those are really expensive places to build solar. So, you know, this is sort of push-pull. Same thing with energy, the sort of the scale of the projects. We could capture a lot of economies of scale if we were building more of these kind of larger projects, the kind of ones that Chris is talking about, you know, 1 megawatt, 2 megawatt, 5 megawatt. Some people don't, you know, would prefer not to see those kinds of projects, would like them to all be very nice and, you know, small and tidy, but that is more expensive to build. So, you know, as we're thinking about how we're moving forward into ultimately 100% renewables, we need to make sure we're balancing those things to keep costs low, but also accrue the other benefits that renewables can really bring. Okay, got a few more minutes. So Gary, quick question.
Can you hear me?
Yep, go for it.
This isn't a new question. This is going back to the other question directed to Chris Heine about PUCs approving large projects. This came up at Renewable Energy Vermont recently, and it was quite clear that the approvals are not at the rate needed to meet the 2030 and so on goals. So Chris, what's your response to that?
Well, I would say, first of all, I don't work for the PUC. I'm at the Public Service Department. So
I know that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you know, kind of as Ben was just kind of saying, there's a push and pull. You know, if people are you know, confronting these projects because they don't want to see solar in their yard, or in their neighbor's yard, right now that's I guess enough, or there can be enough clamor to kind of shut down projects. My personal opinion of that is, you know, I think we all want to live, you know, we all want to continue our quality of life as we're living it, but often a lot of people don't want to pay the costs of doing that, and I think you know, giving up some of your view may end up being just part of meeting those goals. You know.
Thanks, Chris and Gary. I want to get to a quick question from Jim, and then maybe we have time for one more after that. We'll see.
I'm sorry to say I should have jumped in earlier because I'm not the developer, but I am a close relative of a solar developer. And I had to take Chris a little bit to task. I guess it's you. I'm not sure who to address this to. But when you talk about cost shifting, we do cost shifting all over in different forms. The land use one is certainly one of those examples when we have current use. So in addition to that, and I have seen these numbers, we are told that it's costing the utilities a lot to get involved in net metering. We've never seen the actual formula of those numbers. So I have to say, can't say that I would agree that that is really a lot of cost shifting going on. And going back to the permitting process, that, again, not me personally, but I am certainly familiar with a lot of difficulties in permitting large scale projects, meaning 500K and above. So I don't want to gloss over and think that things are really working swell, because they just aren't.
I guess I will take that as a comment more than a question.
Yes,
But thank you for weighing in. The question that has popped up a few times in the chat that the most times in the chat that we haven't gotten to actually isn't so much about solar, which is of course where most community renewables in Vermont are being built, or the technology that's being used to build them. More wind and batteries. I don't know if anyone on the panel has any comments on this, but there were a few comments or questions in the chat about, are we sort of over relying on solar? I'm paraphrasing here, of course, but shouldn't we be focusing more on battery storage, more on wind as well, in order to have sort of a balanced grid going forward as we use more renewables? I see Molly nodding along. Maybe you've got a thought on that you want to share?
Just on the battery side of things, for wind, I think when we're talking about solar, the reason we talk about it so much is because it can be on a very residential basis. Not a lot of people are going to be able to have a turbine in their backyards, but may be able to have a ground mounted or a roof mounted array. But when it comes to batteries and battery storage, personally, I think the potential here is really huge. However, the technology isn't quite there and the affordability isn't quite there yet. They're working on it for sure. Right now, there's Tesla Powerwalls, which are amazing if you can afford one. But they're not quite as common. You can use an electric vehicle as a term of battery storage, and that's something that I think should be explored more in Vermont, is how to use your car as a backup battery. But I think we're probably just not quite there yet in terms of wide scale adoption and application. But as the years go by, I think it's going to become pretty common to have a battery in your garage.
Thanks, Molly. And it was great to hear that at least one of the projects that Chris described is also going to incorporate battery storage. Definitely something that I agree with the comments that we need to see, a lot more of that, and not necessarily batteries, other types of energy storage technologies as well. Sorry, not just batteries. They certainly play a big role. We're at time, but it was coming up. So let me just say briefly that I agree with the idea that wind actually is a good complement to solar, especially seasonally, where you're seeing, a lot more wind in the winter, more, obviously less solar in the winter, and that you get to really see some, day-night benefits as well. That a grid with more diversity of energy sources and sizes and locations is probably a stronger grid in the long term. But obviously, there are some real permitting challenges to wind in the short term. So I really appreciate everyone joining us. Thank you so much to our panelists. This was a fantastic discussion. As always happens with discussions at VCAN, there are more questions and comments and thoughts that we all have than we have time in the day. But obviously, you know where to find all of us. The slides and such will be circulated afterwards. And thank you all again. Looking forward to building this renewable future with you.
Thanks, Ben.